Hello future viewers, this video is going to be a little bit different. I know it's still a tactics RPG, but trust me on this, there's not going to be much resemblance to the Shining Force stuff I've done. I don't have plans to do a video series of this game in the foreseeable future, for reasons that I'll explain as I go, but I still like it a lot and I want to show it off a bit. It's helpful to know that the team that made Berwick Saga had Shozo Kaga in it, the person who could be considered the father of the Fire Emblem series. He left after the completion of Fire Emblem 5 and moved on to projects like this. A lot of aspects of this game have his signature on it. Berwick Saga is set in the kingdom of Varia, which is in a war that they are losing. This is not an unusual setting for this sort of game, but it's the first one I've played that integrates this into the gameplay to the extent that I'm about to show you. Let's start with one of the shops. One of the things that Fire Emblem is known for is gear that breaks. This is even more true in Berwick Saga. Basic weaponry does not last long, so we need to replace our weapons pretty often. One of the things that I'd like to buy is an ordinary longsword. It's the lowest tier of sword that is not complete garbage. There aren't any. Or specifically, there was one in here, and I bought it already earlier in the chapter. The Varian army stops by here every now and then and quote-unquote buys everything that's worth using. For pitiful amounts of money. Probably at spear point. This means that aside from the general scarcity of things, if we do spot something good, we can't just wait on it and save up our money first. That thing will be gone when we move to the next chapter. I need to decide whether to buy this bastard sword right now, and money is kinda tight. There are a lot of important things to spend money on. Let's look at a few more of those things. Now, one of the recurring facts of Fire Emblem is that cavalry is always good, and Berwick Saga is no different. Aside from having good mobility in a game that has many rewards for moving quickly, they can also hit and run. I don't think I have to explain why that's powerful in a game like this. And you pick up a lot of characters that know how to ride horses. However, horses in this game can die. They take damage along with the rider, and healing a horse is not easy. Also, many characters who can ride horses don't start with one. And decent horses are not cheap. In the early game, we can just about afford to get horses for all our guys if we get the thin, sickly horses that should never be anywhere near a battlefield. This means there will be times when some of our cavalry will have to dismount and fight on foot just to avoid having their horses killed out from under them. And if we want a tough, strong horse? Oh, my friend, you're looking at one of the most expensive purchases in the game. I won't say the most expensive, because there are some luxury items that cost more, but as far as practical purchases that strongly affect gameplay, good horses will bankrupt you the fastest if you let them. And of course, if you see a good horse and don't buy one, it will be gone by the next chapter, because you know the main Varian army is going to buy them up and probably get them killed immediately afterwards. Moving on. Let's talk about the characters. By the way, one of the things that you can do to get money is to kill or capture wanted criminals. You'll see them on the maps, but the game doesn't really point them out and say, hey, this is one of those wanted people. You actually have to check the wanted posters in town and kinda make a note of some of the names. Or you can check a guide, that's what I usually do. Anyway, characters. We start with some characters who are sworn members of our team of knights, but a lot of people who can join us are mercenaries. Some of them are really strong, others have growing to do. You have to hire mercenaries for each chapter you want them to be part of your team, and the stronger ones naturally cost quite a bit more. But the weaker ones also get more expensive to hire as you level them up. There is a solution to this, though. If you do the right things, you can get them to like you enough that they officially join your army, and then you can field them whenever you want. What exactly you have to do depends on the character. It's probably best to look at a guide for that. The mercenaries that start out the weakest are easier to recruit, but they take a lot more work to raise up enough that they'll be useful in the late game. And experience is kind of at a premium, since there's a limited number of enemies in the game, although it doesn't always feel that way. Conversely, stronger mercs are pretty much good to go, but you'll pay a lot for them every chapter until they join you for good, so you have to work out a balance of resources. What I've been trying to say this whole time is that Berwick Saga emphasizes long-term planning more than any other tactics game I've played, and this is despite the fact that it doesn't even really have any character customization. Well, each character has their own set of skills, and there are certain things that you'll need to think of when you want to develop them, but the only thing that you get to alter is what gear they're using. That's a Fire Emblem staple, and trust me, you'll have enough to worry about as it is. There's one more thing that I want to show you before we move on. Berwick Saga has a system that we don't see a whole lot in Fire Emblem games, and that's crafting gear. Yep. Technically, there was one spell you could craft in the original Fire Emblem that ended up being pretty important, but this is something else entirely. You can pick up materials here and there as you play, and this being a Kaga game, you have to put in a decent amount of effort into getting your hands on them. We just talked about what a struggle it can be to make sure that you have gear that isn't trash, so an opportunity to get gear that's actually good at a low price is, well, incredibly valuable. That being said, a lot of item recipes share ingredients, so you have to make some decisions on what you need most, which is pretty much the entire theme of the game so far. I think that's about all that I wanted to say about the between chapter stuff right now, as well as some basics idea of what we'll have to struggle with. So let's move on to a battle from here, shall we? Side quest, combat training. That's the mission we're going to show off today. And that side mission thing has some gameplay effects as well. Each chapter has one main story mission and a couple of side quests. Well, the side quests have some story to them as well. You have characters talking to each other before and afterwards, but definitely less important story-wise than the main missions. Anyway, I think, yeah, this team should do fine. We have some newcomers and some veterans. Volo especially. I mean, yeah, I had to pay a lot of money for this guy. I'd better use him. And this mission is a supply raid. Well, that's the official goal. Our main character, Reese, decided to pick up this mission because it'll help our characters get experience, which is true enough. And it looks like we've got a special item to go for, and a time limit for it. Well, that's Fire Emblem for you. You also may have noticed that unlike Fire Emblem, instead of square tiles, we have hexes. Yep, we've gone full tabletop nerd for this game. Gameplay implications, well, there's several of those. One is the highly touted better accuracy over long distances thing, But another thing is that it's actually hard to defend one of your units from being attacked because there's more spaces to access. Oh boy, that sounds like an important mission and he's super excited about it. I have bad news for you, kid. Well, I hope I have bad news for you. Oh boy, it's so boring. Nothing ever happens around here. Well, we've already got some interesting stuff. After so much time playing Shining Force, it's a little bit of a change to have the guys on the opposite team who are not, oh, rawr, look at how evil we are. We like to do all sorts of evil stuff. Which isn't to say that there aren't some extremely vile characters in this game. Oh, don't you worry about that. Just not in this particular case. So, the situation is pretty much as the guy said. And we're going to see the start of a bit of a, well, that is the game in its own way warning us on what to look out for. Oh geez, they are not showing a lot of respect to the beefiest, heavily armored guy in the squad. That seems a little bit odd. Well, we're coming here because they're moving supplies and part of war is disrupting that sort of thing. So, the map layout is basically as they said. They have soldiers here guarding the only way around what looks like a narrow lake here. And this transport is not taking its time. 5 turns is quite a short time to move around and reach this thing. And there's more to it than that. For example, there's crossbowmen hiding in the forests here waiting to ambush us. And I believe more forces show up around here as well, so it's not just this small squad here. And as mentioned, we have this ballista. It's not loaded with ammo yet, but ammo is on the way. And it's gonna get to the ballista before we can fight our way through these guys, because combat is not terribly fast, especially in the early game. So we're looking at a really difficult fight here. So I hired this pirate, and he can move across water no problem, and as they said, the switch to lower the drawbridge is unguarded, so yeah, let's do things that way. The game doesn't tell you about this particular shortcut. It just presents the pirate as one of the mercenaries you can hire from Chapter 1, actually. So it's not like they even introduce him in the same chapter as you have to do this. They just kind of assume that you know how valuable it is to have a unit that can move across water, and he's actually the only one who can. Well, let's set ourselves up to cross that bridge, shall we? Oops. Standby is a neat feature, by the way. It lets you your character just wait until you tell it not to, which is more convenient than giving it the same order every turn. Although that's an odd circumstance in this game. Usually I have most of my characters moving around and doing stuff, although on this particular turn that's kind of minimized. By the way, units that cannot ride horses have a few benefits that are not really spelled out. For example, their movement on foot is better than cavalry riders' foot movement. For example, Dean can move onto and off of cliffs a lot more easily than our cavalry here, even when they're not mounted. I guess that's because they're dragging the horses with them or something. By the way, turn order. You can see that in the upper right, and it works differently from just about any game that I've played. The turn order is sort of presented, but the actual order that the units are going to move is less straightforward. Whenever a green marker comes up, you can move any of your units that hasn't moved already in this full turn, and the same goes for the computer. So you know generally whose turn it's going to be, but not who's actually going to take that turn. And this has a number of implications, one of which being a unit that moves early in a turn is actually very vulnerable, because you know that they aren't going to move again for quite a while, whereas when you're dealing with units that haven't moved yet, you have to be a little careful, because they could, for example, retreat and use a healing item, or at least maneuver so that not so many people can attack him, and there's generally more ways for them to defend themselves. And that's just turn order. Well, let's drop this drawbridge, shall we? We can also raise it if we want to. By the way, see that leaf symbol? Some units can hide in certain terrain, which is to say the enemy doesn't know you're there, and even if they happen to move next to you by blind chance, it works a little bit like Advance Wars and the like, in which they have to actually discover you first before they can have another unit move in and attack. So it's a very handy skill to have. Well then, let's not waste any time. We have a couple of soldiers here, as well as the supply transporter. By the way, this music is something else, isn't it? So let's talk about the progression of combat in this game. I should have equipped Christine with a crossbow, that way she could have counterattacked. Oh well, that was me being sloppy. Now this works similarly to a Fire Emblem battle progression, in that the attacker moves, and then the defender gets to counterattack, and then the attacker, if faster, attacks again. However, this is a big however. This sequence ends when anyone involved takes damage. Now, for Fire Emblem veterans, this means that you cannot just enemy phase everything, except with a very particular set of skills, but that's... I will just say don't do that, or at least be very careful about that, for the vast majority of the time. And yep, that did not take long for them. If we had gone this way, we would have been surrounded already. It means that the attacker has a very large advantage. Because there's a good chance that they will simply hit their initial attack and no counterattack will happen. like that. And there's the hit and run that I was talking about. Well, interesting. Can I catch up to that guy? He only moves 3 hexes a turn. And also, if the counterattack hits, then any follow-up is cut off. So, hitting an enemy more than once in an exchange is exceedingly rare. I think I'd like to get Axel up here, because even if he doesn't catch the transporter unit before he supplies the ballista, he can just pulverize the ballista instead. And that wasn't just, you know, strong language. Pulverize is an actual thing. Yes, there are indeed special attacks in this game, although a lot of the time I'm going to use normal attacks anyway, because special attacks tend to either have a multi-turn cooldown, or they have some serious drawbacks to them. Such as this guy has the Desperation attack, which greatly increases hit rate, but it also allows the enemy to counterattack no matter what, and it automatically hits and my defense is set at 0. So I better have a good reason to do that. Uh-oh. Alright, well that could have been worse. Now, even though we kind of caught the enemy off the guard with this little maneuver, well, there's 2 ways we can do this. One is we can just defeat the transporter and then have everyone retreat and the mission will be counted as successful. But, it would be a good idea to fight these guys if possible. I mean, as I said before, we do need experience. This guy, by the way, is notable. Let's talk about shields. Many kinds of units can carry them, although the size of shield they can carry depends on the character class. When a character is attacked and he has a shield, he or she has a chance to guard with it depending on their shield skill. And then the shield's defense is added to the character defense. This character guards quite a bit, and we do not have any characters that can get through 26 defense. And we have no characters who can attack with magic yet. So that seems like a bad situation. Also, this guy hits fairly hard, and his axe skill is also not bad. So we'll have to watch out for that guy. Oh yes, weapon and shield skill. I guess now is a good time to talk about that. Well, I'd like Elbert to hold the bridge if possible. And to that end, I'm going to have him dismount because I do not want his horse to take unnecessary hits. It's a good horse, by the way. I got it through means other than buying it, let's put it that way. Well, weapon skill and shield skill. Now, this game has something in common with Ring of Red, which is stats do not really increase a whole lot. Even with level up, a level up where you only gain a point of strength is considered a very good level up. The thing that you're going to consistently get throughout the course of the game is accuracy, and that's because your skill with weapons increases as you use them. Of course, the speed that this happens depends on the character. Uh-oh. Yeah, Dean is kind of a monster. Yep, there we go. I probably should have dismounted him as well, but I guess it can't be helped. Anyway, shield skill also increases with use, of course. And this is actually kind of a tricky thing. We definitely want our shield skill to be high in the later game because we're going to need that extra defense. However, that also necessitates us getting hit, because you don't trigger shield skill growth unless an attack actually strikes you. Even if you don't successfully guard with the shield, your shield skill goes up because, I suppose, your character realizes what they should have done. But with the agile characters for whom learning a shield is also important, things get a little tricky. By the way, there is no weapon triangle in this game. Instead, weapons have different properties. For example, spears do more damage if your character moves more tiles before attacking. And this naturally makes cavalry the best spear users. So I think that's pretty neat. Let's see, what turn is this? I know it's not turn 5 yet, and the reason I know it's not turn 5, well, you'll see. So, can we block this guy off? Not quite, but we can try attacking him. Yeah, if we can kill this guy... Oh, a hit rate of 49 though, that is not the best thing. So let's try a bow attack first. Although, that's also not great hit rate. It's an extra try to hit him. Yeah, it's not a guaranteed thing that we'll be able to stop this guy, which is why I wanted to make sure I had a backup plan. Well, since different characters grow their weapon rates differently, it seems like it would make sense for characters to use whatever their specialty is. In Albert's case, that would be swords. So why am I having him use spears? Well, long-term planning again. About that. So let's talk about character promotion. Character promotion in this game is not, I repeat, not done by using an item or reaching a particular experience level or anything like that. Instead, you have to... Well, actually, experience level is sometimes involved, but it is actually character specific. The most difficult part is reaching certain skill ranks with their weapons and shields. And most characters have a weapon that they're not good with, but still have to level up a fair bit. In this case, in Albert's case, it's spears, which he is not good at growing, but he needs for promotion. And as I mentioned before, stat growth is not fast. Not in the slightest. So any little bit you can get from promoting helps quite a bit. By the way, if Albert gets overwhelmed, I'm gonna have him and Izerna back off and have Volo guard the bridge. And they aren't going to beat Volo, I guarantee that. Well, let's talk about the next mechanic. There's a lot. Let's see, I need to have Dean over here to set up a particular thing later. Let's talk about one of the special moves, Deathmatch. This is an impressive and risky move. So remember how I said the sequence of combat ends if someone takes damage? Deathmatch starts a 5-round long battle in which that does not apply. You better be sure that you can beat the enemy if you initiate one of those. Maybe you don't do that on bosses. And before you even ask, yes, there are bosses who have Deathmatch and can use it on you. In fact, if you think of any particular very dangerous skill set after learning about what skills do, you can be pretty sure that there's a boss that does that. Now, I want to wait until turn 5 because of another feature that I will go over. It should be interesting. Let's see, you two can wait here. Yeah, that's good for now. By the way, you can use the start button to just mark certain tiles as tiles of note. This is useful for many things, such as just marking down the range that you should not move into for whatever reason. Or for important tiles that might not be important on first glance. Oh, speaking of which, on turn 5, the transport does not just vanish the way you might expect for a time limit of this sort. It actually has to move to the retreat square, and we can block its way to stop that. So that's a nice feature too. Yes, well, every 5 turns, the game just lets you save. This is a very, very handy feature, because maps can get long. The main story maps in particular. There are a lot of things to do in story maps, both as required and side things to do for extra rewards afterwards. A side effect of this feature is that anyone that I know of who's experienced this game takes this save feature as permission to basically rig whatever result they want out of the next few moves, because there are certain important and helpful things that are dependent on the random number generator. Speaking of random number generation, let's talk about injury. Now, this Imperial Porter is carrying a lot of gear and supplies. We could destroy most of it and take the repair stone, but wouldn't it be better if we could capture all that stuff? That's where injury and cripple comes in. It has nothing to do with this axe attack, by the way. That's just fortunate. Well, it turns out that taking hits in battle can affect you in bad ways. This incredibly novel and counterintuitive mechanic comes from an injury system. For example, Arthur has a special attack that can be used once every 4 turns, although effectively every 5 turns, that has a 33% chance to cause an injury, which is much higher than the default random chance. That's the green cross on that unit's little model. If a unit that has weapons and a shield, which is most of them, gets injured, it loses its grip on its gear. It can still re-equip it on its own turn. However, if a unit that's already used its turn gets injured, that makes it really vulnerable. Can't counterattack or defend itself with a shield. And furthermore, being injured increases the risk considerably that the unit will get crippled. Whereas any attack can cause an injury, to cripple a unit you have to hit it pretty hard. Like, dealing more than half of its health and dealing a large number of its total health are both factors in this. Just hit it really, really hard, but just come just short of killing it to get the best crippling chance, if I read the formula correctly. And the chance is considerably increased if the unit is already injured, which is why I went to the trouble of... I mean, Arthur... That was just blind luck that Arthur succeeded with that injury, and that I got that cripple afterwards. So crippled units are, as the name might suggest, quite helpless. They can't fight at all. They can barely move. In fact, their ability to move is governed by their current hit points compared to their max hit points, which, if they've been crippled, is probably very low. Although healing the unit will help it start moving it again. And worst of all, a unit that has been crippled can just be captured at will. When you capture an enemy unit, you get all of their stuff. This makes capturing a unit, and by extension injury and cripple, one of the best things that you can do on a map in Berwick Saga. And it's especially helpful, of course, for doing it to bosses, which tend to have good gear. And there's more benefits. The capturing unit gets experience as though it had killed the captured unit, and considering how difficult certain characters are to level up, such as thieves, this can be great for feeding experience to less combat-intensive characters. In addition, I mentioned those wanted posters before. Capturing a wanted criminal gives twice the money compared to killing it. So, capturing units is the best thing. It's great. It's also very highly random chance dependent, and it's not really worth it to set up a capture for just ordinary units. I mean, it does still happen sometimes at random, but the chances are not high. Oh yeah, there's something else even. The Empire and the Berwick League have sort of a ransom treaty set up, wherein if you capture an Imperial unit, they will ransom that unit back to you for some cash. This also works the other way around. Your units can get injured and crippled and captured, and they will lose their stuff, and if you want them back, you'll have to pay a lot to get them back. And even if a crippled unit manages to avoid capture by you blocking it off or something, well, it's still really badly hurt. I say it, even. I'm using that as shorthand for he or she. And you'll have to wait until the next chapter to get them back. And I believe that healing them up also costs some money. Or maybe that's just doing it more quickly. Either way. Be careful about your units who get injured. Try not to let them take really severe hits, although, I mean, as if you always have control over that. But just be aware of how all that works. It's really interesting. It adds some risk and opportunity to combat. I think it's pretty fun. And, you know, you're gonna if you look at more videos of this game, you're going to find how lucky turn 5 is. How Arthur's flourish always seems to land that injury on the perfect target right after the turn 5 for some mysterious reason. So, we captured a whole lot of Imperial weapons from that guy. And there's also this shop, which I don't know why they're selling their stuff to us. They're apparently their last few pieces of gear. Maybe it has something to do with surrounding that shop with military units. But anyway, this stuff is dirt cheap. Imperial gear hits pretty hard, although it's a little less accurate than Varian gear. Still, it is basic gear that anyone can use. It's going to be very useful to us. I decided, since there wasn't enough space for everything, most of our characters just will never be able to use large shields, and the Imperial bow is a bit too inaccurate for my taste. Both of the bow units that I use don't have extremely good bow skills, so I want to use the higher accuracy version for quite a while, so I felt safe leaving the Imperial bow behind. Still, thanks to capturing the Imperial supplies and, quote-unquote, buying that gear from that nearby shop, I now have enough basic gear to last me a pretty decent amount of time. So that solves that problem for the time being. That's pretty nice. I also like that the shop is there as kind of a consolation prize for if you don't manage to capture the Imperial supplies. You always get the repair stone, and that is by far the most valuable item he's carrying. So it's not a huge it's not a huge disaster if you don't pull it off. Also, here I'm trying to work out how to stop that particular other supply carrier from bringing the ballista bolts over. The thing is, if I move Axel over there, he's probably going to be attacked by a whole bunch of guys, and his evade is not amazing. But that actually brings up a point about evasion and accuracy and stuff. If you've been looking closely, you've noticed that my hit rates are not great. In fact, they're kinda trash. Like 60%, 50%. Most weapons do not have extremely good base accuracy. Like 60% base accuracy is very good. That's because our starting skill for most of our characters is, well, low. It depends on the character, of course. Volo, being an already powerful person, doesn't have too many accuracy issues, but pretty much everyone else. Like, Ruby, the person who I moved to guard the bridge, has a very low sword skill. I think she has 5 or perhaps even lower, and that's one of the reasons I want her to do a whole bunch of fighting here to build that up a little bit. Each point of skill increases your hit rate by 1%, and as characters grow, they'll move up to... Oh, by the way, quick explanation. That's the use of 2 skills in conjunction with each other. Hide, which I've already described, and Overwatch, which allows a ranged unit to automatically attack anything that comes close. And if it hits, it ends their turn. But Volo is an evasion machine, so that didn't slow him down any. I think it also actually has to deal damage, but crossbows hit pretty hard, so that would probably not be a problem. And this is one of the reasons right here why it's great to spend the money to hire someone who can kind of move forward and not be afraid of getting attacked a bunch. Yeah, it's kind of implied that Varia started this war under suspicious circumstances. I don't know if I implied it heavily enough before, but a lot of the people you work for are pretty suspect. Have no fear, though. Plenty of the people you're fighting are also suspect. There's plenty to go around. It's that kind of game. Now, if I wanted Volo to hit really hard, I would have him use a heavy blade, but I don't want him to kill everyone here. I want to set other people up so that our lower level guys can kill them. That's one of the best functions of guys like that, of an anchor character. And now that I think about it, the overall makeup of our team and their team is fairly similar. By the way, this is a reason why Elbert is great for fishing out those Overwatch ambushes. The Arrowbane skill is very handy for that sort of thing. He also has a skill called Provoke that he can use on a whole lot of different enemies. It even works on ballistas, and Arrowbane works on them. Just thought I'd throw that out there. I didn't have the opportunity to use that skill in this particular battle, but I like to point these things out. Well, it's a little unfortunate that I can't remount upon leaving a building. You have to dismount to enter buildings, by the way, such as the shop I just pointed out. But I really want to get her bow skills behind Ruby to provide support and kill the enemies a little bit faster. Also, she needs the bow skill. Well, from using bows. I keep using the same word for certain things. Like, there's special attack skills and then there's weapon skills, but I hope that you've gotten the general idea and that I haven't been too confusing about this. Well, there's other game mechanics that I haven't had time to explain either, like how the various ranges work in this game. Melee attacks are range 0, which means that the attacker goes into the defender's tile. Which means that if the defender is on a tile that provides a lot of evasion, and the initial attack misses, the counterattack also has to deal with the extra evasion because they're both on the same tile. Of course, the reverse also happens if it's a very bad tile for dodging, like these cliffs, but that tends to still be a kind of a one-way disadvantage, because with a tile like that, the attacker is probably not going to miss anyway. Oh yeah, one of those things about war is the enemy also sometimes has worn-out equipment, especially for enemies that are kind of backline, not expected to see a whole lot of combat. They tend to get the old broken down stuff. And Arthur is injured, and that's really dangerous for reasons that I've already described. Fortunately, he hasn't had his turn yet. Or actually, no, I take that back. Fortunately, he was one of the last people to move, so he can get another turn quickly, but oh. Well, moving him back didn't completely save him, but I guess putting him in a forest helped out at least a little bit, theoretically. I don't know what the actual numbers were. Oh dear, oh dear. If you're gonna attack Axel, you better make sure you can hit him. He's not a great fighter, but he does hit very hard. Well, so, how to remove injury and cripple? This seems like an important thing to talk about now that one of our units is injured. So injuries will go away on their own after a few turns, although I don't think that's a great idea, because aside from the crippling risk, injury also reduces your evade, and I think it might also reduce your hit rate. However, you can get rid of it early by just healing the unit to full health. And yes, you do get a healer early on. The game is at least that merciful. Although the amount that she heals early is not very high. Yeah, you don't get strong healing for quite a while. You just have to do with a little bit at a time. Better than nothing still. And that scared me a lot. Because Volo is kind of far away from healing, and this is something I've never actually seen before. Apparently you can lose grip on your weapon without actually taking an injury. It must be a very low chance because that's the first time I'd seen something like that. I don't think it's a bug, and I don't think that he has a passive skill that prevents injury. It's just a thing that happened. But hey, I guess getting hit can make you drop things sometimes. Who knew? You gotta be aware that unexpected things like that can happen, I guess. Adds a little bit to the thrill. Also, remember that desperation skill I was talking about before? Well, if you have the health to back it up and a good enough reason, it has sort of an extra benefit to it, which is you use desperation, you take the counterattack, and if you're a decent amount faster, you can get a second attack, and that's... With a character like Dean, who hits very hard, you can just kill a boss like that. And, excuse me, going back to what I said about the composition, both our side and the Imperials had a bunch of kind of low-level beginner units, and one more experienced, more able anchor character. In their case, it was the boss. And, by the way, main story chapters have several notable enemy characters, not just the main boss, who, well, is certainly a step above the rest, but there are often, in fact, I believe every story chapter has at least a couple of extra named characters with unusual weapons or skills or stuff like that to watch out for. By the way, I forgot to point this out, but maybe you noticed it during the enemy turn. Remember that armored guy who I was talking about how he could probably beat all of us if we tried to take him head on? Yeah, he just moved. He kept walking along the road and exited to the south of the map. Just like that. Didn't even say a thing. He's kind of a meme. But I don't want to spoil things any more than that. So I think that's about it for what I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, we saw a random injury at the bridge, so that's good news for Ruby. And the rest of this map is pretty much just cleaning up. We've dealt with the boss, we've kind of disrupted the enemy plans, and as you can see, they're all scattered now. So there's not too much more to say about this particular battle. Oh, actually, I take that back. I hadn't actually described ranged 1 or 2 with how terrain works. Range 1 is when you use a ranged attack on an enemy in an adjacent tile. Both bows and crossbows can do this, as you just saw. And melee units cannot counterattack unless they are very fast. I suppose if they're fast enough, they just run up and hit you before you can get your distance. Range 2 attacks are attack from 2 hexes away, and they work about as you would expect, like you just saw. You just shoot an enemy. But the thing is, terrain defenses are doubled for that. So you might, if you take a look at terrain bonuses, they're actually not that high. But that's to take into account the doubling for protection against longer range stuff. Let's see, crossbows have a range of 0 to 1, so they can pick on adjacent melee units, but they can also counterattack them, so that's pretty good. They also don't take strength into account, they just have a higher base might, which is great for lower strength characters like, well, like the one who was using a crossbow not too long ago. That also makes crossbows some of the scarier weapons among lower stat units, such as what we're fighting right now. And okay, now I think we've got it covered. Let's move on. Well, it looks like we got ourselves a nice little bit of loot here. This is one of the benefits of stopping to fight all of the Imperials rather than just sneaking across, beating up the supply guy, and then running. Although, I suspect that most veterans of this sort of game would do what I'm doing anyway, except in a low turn count run. Also, that skill she used, Aim, very interesting skill for a game like this. Your accuracy is increased a lot if you attack before moving. I say before because she can use hit and run to attack with high accuracy and then move away to a better spot if that's the case. And here's another feature of the standard battle progression, which is, you know how you can counterattack if the initial attack didn't deal damage? That also covers just not breaking through defenses, not just dodging. So that is something to keep in mind when you're encountering enemies with a strong shield. Also, Pulverize. It's really strong. It's another attack skill that lowers your defense to 0, but it doesn't care about whether the enemy can fight back. So I was able to do that. And this is an amazing level up. Now, Axel's battle skills are not good enough to carry him to the end game, but still, stat bonuses like that will kind of extend his ability to be useful further into the game, so I'm still pretty happy about it. Also, shields break quite a bit faster than weapons do, which is kind of a problem because, as I said, we still need to develop those shield skills, which makes them a pretty significant drain on our funds, actually, at least for the decent shields. We can always equip leather shields, which give a paltry 1 defense, and that's not as bad an idea as it sounds, unlike with equipping garbage weapons, because we still develop our shield skill for use of better shields later, and it doesn't hurt us too much, at least not in the early game. Also, one thing about hit and run. If you take damage from a counterattack, you don't get to hit and run, so that's something to consider. It is a risk you're taking if you depend on Kanto, which is the name of the hit and run thing. And conversely, this makes hit and run for ranged units like this a whole lot more reliable and safer. Horse archers are a great tactical advantage, go figure. It also let my archer move out of the way so I could heal Ruby. She was in a fair bit of danger there due to a crossbow hit. As I said, fairly nasty. But that just about wraps it up. I did skip a little bit of the cleanup here and there, but hopefully I was able to show off a lot of the more interesting stuff about this game. And by the way, this is an early map. It could have gotten really ugly if I didn't use the shortcut thing there, but there are going to be later maps that also can get very ugly, but without nearly as obvious or easy to use solutions. In fact, things get really brutal. I do not have confidence in my ability to finish this game, which is why I'm not starting a full playthrough. And given the complexity, I do not expect that to change anytime soon. And since battles take so long, I'm not even sure if making a YouTube series about it would be a good idea. So there's a whole lot of uncertainty there. Lord Reese is our main character and typical Fire Emblem Lord unit, but unlike most Fire Emblem Lords, he is not only not forced to go with us on every map, but he actually cannot go with any of our battles except for the main chapter battles, which makes him pretty difficult to level up, actually, and it's worth doing so. There are many good perks if you can get him strong enough, but that's a tough job. Well, I think that's finally it. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.